Welcome to CEO Chairside with Dr. Grillo, where real dentists share the real stories behind the scrubs. From the operatory to ownership, from day one chaos to planning an exit on your terms. This is where dentistry meets life, leadership, and legacy. No scripts, no fluff, just unfiltered conversations that move the profession forward. Let's get into it. Well, hi there, and welcome back to another episode of CEO Chairside. I am Dr. Greg Grillo, and happy to be here with you. And it's just me today. And these aren't very long when I jump on and talk to you about something really specific. And today, this is something I think resonates with all of us as practice owners. Because what if I told you that in the next 90 days, if you didn't raise your fees, you didn't work more hours, you didn't add new services, you could see a measurable increase in profitability, just more going to the bottom line. And, I've seen practices do that. In fact, one of my coaching clients I've been working with has added about 15% to their monthly net income in less than 3 months. And it's just simply by making a few strategic changes that really didn't cost a dime. And that's the key, is that it's got to be strategic. So today, obviously, we can't impact the bottom line dramatically in 10 minutes, but I'm going to walk through the exact framework that I use with practices to give that profit a 90-day boost. And so whether you're feeling squeezed by rising costs, everybody's in that boat, stagnant collections, maybe you're struggling there, you're just looking for more breathing room in your margins overall, this episode is just designed to give you a clear, simple plan that you can start using tomorrow. And I'm thinking of a client of mine who we just looked at the way the hygiene was being scheduled and how far out it was being scheduled. And we decided that it made a whole lot more sense to see those patients soon, like this week, versus waiting to see them 3 or 4 weeks out. And by adding just 1 day of hygiene, we moved those appointments up and expanded the production very quickly. And some of this is just mindset and how we look at things. So before we talk some of these tactics in a little bit more detail, let's start with a mindset shift. I mean, profit growth, it's not just about making more money. It's about keeping more of what you earn. I've seen doctors, like I mentioned, increase collections by 15%, but they actually take home less because the overhead crept up even faster. And that's been a pretty significant problem in the last couple of years. But the good news is that in 90 days, you can create enough momentum to start to see results. And once you see it working, you want to keep it going. So you think of this as like a tune-up for your practice engine. You're fixing leaks, you're improving efficiency, and you're just getting more miles per gallon from the work that you're already doing, the people that you're already seeing. Again, I was working with a dentist recently, and she was convinced that needed to see more patients. But when we did an analysis of their capacity, it turned out that that really wasn't the lever that we wanted to turn. Some practices do need to turn the more patients lever. And we're going to talk a little bit about that profitability formula. But when we looked at some of the expense categories and went line by line, we saw that there were a couple really key areas that I often find are valuable, that we could just increase the net income a little bit without any extra hours. So let's make this really simple. Let's look at the 7 category overhead model. And most of you are familiar with the different categories of overhead, but I always like to keep things really simple, because when you look at a P&L, there's a lot of lines on there. And some of your P&Ls will organize the categorization of that data pretty well. But we want to really look at these gauges of your financial dashboard of your practice. If we just go into 7 categories and get everything distilled down and then give it targets, it starts to make a lot more sense. So first of all, you have staffing. That's your salaries, your wages, your benefits. It's a big one. And it's the one that's one of the most difficult to control in this environment that we've been in. Number 2 is occupancy. This is your rent, your utilities, your building expenses, all of that. You have your marketing, your advertising, your promotions, different campaigns. And then lab costs is number 4, crowns, appliances, ventures, everything that's your outside lab fees. and then supplies, dental and office supplies. And if you're CERAC office, we often look at this a little bit differently between these two as far as targets, but this is a general guide for overhead. Number six is your administrative costs, all that stuff, right? Your insurance, your legal, your accounting, general office expenses, everything from staples to sticky notes. And then seven is what we call human and physical resource development. Now, this is your continuing education, some of your technology in your office, computer costs, your equipment upgrades, your consulting, that kind of thing. So, if one of these is out of range, it's like driving with a flat tire. I mean, you can move forward that way, but you're really wasting energy and hurting performance. So, really, step one when we understand this is to find the quick wins, right? The low effort, the high impact changes you can make right away. And when you're looking at overhead, it is good to go down first through the seven areas of overhead and then look even at individual costs within that. You can start with your supply and lab costs. Can you consolidate vendors? Could you join a buying group? Could you renegotiate contracts? In my practice, we negotiated with our primary vendor. We set a goal together and I told him what I wanted my overhead to be. And I saved actually tens of thousands of dollars a year without affecting quality by having a very proactive, engaged approach. Now, there's also some AI software for supplies that you may or may not be aware of. These are tools can do help you with comparative shopping, and that can be very, very valuable. That's just an example. There's also opportunities when we look at merchant service fees. That's one that I often find a quick win in. Even if you don't change merchant services, but you get a comparative quote from someone who really wants your business, and then you go back to your existing vendor and you say, "Hey, I'm thinking about changing. I really don't want to, but I need you to be able to beat this." And many, many times they will beat it, and you can pick up a quick win, which is instant money to your bottom line, and I've seen this work over and over again, and I used it myself as well. So, something to think about. These are just a couple examples, and there are many, many more. When I'm working with clients, we go through and really look at strategies for every area of overhead. And again, we just try to find those quick wins, right? So then step two is really about squeezing more value out of the schedule you already have. Maybe it's not really so much about just adding a whole bunch, but think about every open chair that you have. It costs you real money. And once it's gone, you can't get it back once that hour goes by. So you really want to track open chair hours just like you do cancellations or no shows. If you have a operatory that's just sitting empty for a couple hours, that is a lost opportunity. And so you think about the math, and we can just use some numbers. But if, let's say, your doctor column averages $500 an hour in production and you lose just 4 hours a week, maybe it's just an hour a day at most. Well, that's $2,000 a week in lost production. And over 90 days, that's $24,000 gone. And if it's hygiene at say 150 an hour, losing even 2 hours a week, that's another $2,700 per quarter. This is money that's lost while you're already in the office. So one fix, you just want to get really proactive with your highest risk slots. If early mornings or late Fridays are cancellation magnets and you can track this, maybe you strategically double book them or fill them from a VIP short notice list. Not a big fan of double booking, but there are some strategies where you can do that, whereas if both show up, you still have the chair time, but it's maybe a little bit of a scramble. Things that you can figure out. The point is to get very proactive and really learn where you have challenges on the schedule. So I worked with a practice that they kept the VIP list visible all day, and there's some great software if you're probably using something like that. But whenever a cancellation popped up, they filled it within an hour. They're really good at it. You can even automate some of this. And what it did is it recovered over $18,000 in production in about a 3-month period. So these are simple little things, and it maybe what you're starting to sense here is that incremental gain is a big deal. So you don't have to hit home runs. We'll take base hits all day long. If we can pick up $24,000 by more efficient use over 90 days of our operatories, and we could pick up $15 to $20,000 by having a more effective VIP short notice cancellation policy list. Then these wins all start to add up. And number three, what I like to look at is hygiene. There's a lot to talk about with hygiene, but hygiene can be such a growth driver if you manage it proactively. And I took my hygiene program from about $13,000 a month when I first bought the practice, and we peaked at about $70,000 a month in the practice in about a 3 or 4 year period. So we ramped it up with a lot of strategies. There's a lot that we could go through on that. But here's basically my rule of thumb. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier. If hygiene is just consistently booked out more than 2 or 3 weeks, it's time to add some capacity. It doesn't mean you need another full time hygienist. Maybe you need an extra day. Maybe you need just a half day. Maybe you need to have a temp hygienist come in a little bit. And why is that? Again, because you want to produce now what you could produce a month from now. So if a $1,200 hygiene day happens this week instead of 4 weeks from now, that's revenue that starts working for you immediately. And then it opens space for more patients next month. And most patients don't really want to wait all that long. So if you're putting somebody out 3 or 4 weeks, when just by adding a little capacity, you could have them in today, that revenue is here now, and you have the space open for somebody else as you get closer to that time. Think of it like an airline seat, right? Like, so once the flight takes off, you can't sell it later. And hygiene hours really work the same way. So I've had clients, even in my own office, we were booked out way too far. But I had one client I was working with in California, and they were booked out about 6 to 8 weeks. And what we did is we just added one hygiene day per week. And over a 90-day period, that ended up actually being about $60,000 in additional production. And many of those patients scheduled treatment the same day, right? Because they're in for hygiene. And that created even more revenue. Really learning how to manage hygiene and monitor the dashboard of hygiene, how far out you're booked and how far you're letting production sit out there is a game changer, and it's core to a very successful practice. And then the final step for today is just measurement, just getting really good at measuring, even if it's some of the things that we've just talked about. Maybe pick just one key number to track weekly: production. What are your adjustments? What's your overhead percentage? What's your scheduled to goal days? What is your goal for the day? And just keep it really simple, visible. Celebrate small wins with the team. Teams get really energized when they see progress, and production goes up simply from awareness a lot of times. And if you're using some of the software out there, some of the analytics software, X by numbers, dental intelligence, some of these types of programs, there's so much power in them. And basically, if you're not measuring, you're guessing, and guessing is expensive in dentistry. So just by getting a little more focused on these core increments and starting somewhere, and you can start to add more and more profitability. And that's just over a 90-day period. Then you extrapolate it out over a year, 5 years, 10 years. I like to use a calculator with many of my clients and show them how these increments add up as you have this proactive approach. So basically, here's your quick 90-day profit makeover plan. And I know you can pick up a win at least in one of these categories. But first of all, you want to find your quick wins. And through a couple ideas, I've got dozens and dozens more I'd love to talk to you about. But find some just little quick wins and go through your P&L, look for it, and you will find them. It's just like your household budget. Have you ever looked at your credit cards and said, "Why am I still subscribed to that?" And then you cancel some type of subscription that you've had and you pick up a few bucks. It's an incremental win. Number two, you're going to tighten your schedule efficiency. Really get in there and take a look at this. There's multiple areas to look at, but analyze your open chair time and then figure out what could we do with that chair to produce anything. Even if you don't hit the full, say, 500 an hour, what if you produce 200 an hour from some type of a service that maybe an assistant could be involved with? And then 3, leverage your hygiene department. This is so big and there's a lot to talk about there, but take a look at your hygiene department and see how far out you're booked, and if you can add even a half day a week, do the math on it over the next 90 days. And then, of course, measure and track weekly. It's just a great habit to get into and to get your team involved in as well. So these are just 4 steps that can really transform your profitability without adding hours or raising fees. Those are also strategies. But if you'd like to see where some of these 90-day opportunities are hiding, I'd love to talk to you at any time. Just give me a call, reach out on my website, send me an email. And in future episodes, we're going to be really looking at more success stories from 90-day periods, from 1-year periods, from whole careers. And so please subscribe to CEO Chairside so you don't miss them and some of the stories that we're going to share, not just from me, but from some really fantastic dentists out there like yourselves. And hey, if you're interested in coming on my podcast, reach out. I'd love to hear your story. Love to hear some of the lessons that you have to share. So here's to keeping more of what you earn and loving the way your practice runs. I'll talk to you next time. That's it for this episode of CEO Chairside. Real stories, real lessons, because this profession is more than a practice. It's a journey. Catch you next time.